What's up, guys? It's Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down how wide receivers can never lose a one-on-one rep again. So I hope this video helps you guys out. I hope it can teach you some new things that'll help you beat man coverage, how to beat physical DBs, and all things of that nature. But also, fellas, we are going to be traveling out to 15 more states for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camps this offseason. So if you guys are local to one of these states, or it's San Francisco, California, Orlando, New Orleans, Charlotte, Dallas, the DMV, St. Louis, Honolulu, Boston, Cleveland, Austin, Seattle, Newark, Denver, or Los Angeles. Check out that very first link below. We'd love to have you out to one of our off-season camps, 2 whole days. We'll have DBs out there for wide receiver one-on-ones, and it's going to be 8 hours of training total. So check out that very first link below. If we're coming to a city near you, let's get started. So now, first things first here, when it comes to winning one-on-one reps, a lot of the times it's based off of reaction. So when you have man coverage against a DB, sometimes he's going to take things away. Sometimes he's going to play something right. He might be in the right position at the wrong time. And, we might think something's going to work, but it might not. And we still have to be able to react. So let's look at this fade route here from this wide receiver. So he was starting to take an outside release. DB overcommitted. He put the brakes on and took the inside release on a fade. Now, a lot of people do not like the inside release on a fade. They don't like guys slipping underneath like this, because they feel that, you should never take an inside release on an outside breaking route or an outside route like a fade route. That's completely wrong. If this DB, his whole goal being in press coverage, and you have to understand this, is when he's lined up inside shaded or even head up, and he doesn't have any help to the inside, that sideline is his help. So he's trying to force you into that sideline the absolute best he can. He wants you to come off the ball. He wants you to just take off and run so he can get hands and squeeze you all the way to that sideline. That's something that I have to be aware of as a wide receiver, and I have to know how to combat that. So this wide receiver comes off the ball, gives this move to the inside, tries to get the DB to hold his leverage, but he takes off. And he sees when he takes off to the outside, this DB's overcommit. He's already got a good angle on him. He's opened up. He's running, and he's trying to take away that outside release. Or not so much take it away, but force you to the sideline. Now, I want to make this clear too. There are some plays where it's a must outside release. Like it's cover 2. Maybe you have like an out route and a 5-yard. Like you have a 5-yard out and a fade route, and you have to release to the outside. This is not one of those scenarios. This is like a 4 vertical concept where you don't have anything going to the flats, and we're just trying to push this ball downfield. If this guy overreacts, sometimes I might have to adjust. He overreacts. Okay, I could do something we call slip under release. So I attack to the outside. It's not for a set amount of steps. It could be 1 step. It could be 5 steps. It really does not matter. But when that DB overcommits, we could just put the foot in the ground and slip back underneath. Because trust me, if we're able to restack, we're able to get to a position where this DB is trailing my back hip, there is no difference than me taking an outside release and stacking than me taking an inside release and stacking. Ultimately, you end up at the exact same spot. On a fade route, fellas, quarterbacks want space to throw you open. They call it a fade route for a reason. They're trying to put this ball between the sideline and the numbers, that area. But if you're running all the way to the sideline, they have no space to fade. They want you to be top of the numbers so they can fade you back out and throw you away from the defender. I can't do that if I force my release, if I run off and just let this DB squeeze me to that sideline. Sometimes you have to be able to react, and that's how you guys can win a lot of one-on-one scenarios. So let's get to this next tip. There's a pretty good release here by this wide receiver, but great job reacting and being able to slip underneath because that DB overcommitted to that sideline. Okay, so now, second thing I want to talk about is how wide receivers can get skinny on routes, and when you should kind of be aware to use this type of movement. So let's play this full speed. So this is an inside release, kind of like I can't really tell if it's a dig or a post, but let's call it a dig, for example. So anytime that you guys are here, and this wide receiver, here's the numbers, and he has his split cut down, right? So he's more inside the numbers. A smart DB, whenever he's playing man coverage, and you ask any DB, coach this, you ask any DB this at all, when this receiver cuts his split down, and that means he's scooting in from the sideline. Usually, why is he doing that? He's doing that to run an outside breaking route. So we have to know how to run my routes, not only against inside shade press when it's a one-on-one, head-up press, but also outside shade press. So that's where this getting skinny term comes into play. So when he's outside shade, usually he's got some kind of help to the inside, whether that's a linebacker dropping back, maybe it's like a robber, maybe it's a safety, whatever it is. So he's trying to force us to the inside. So when I'm running this route, I have to do a good job of maintaining my space. So obviously we talked about in the last clip, if he's outside shade, he's, like you said, trying to prevent the outside, force everything inside. So as a receiver, I know no matter what route it is, I'm going to have to take that inside release. A disciplined DB will not give me the outside. So he attacks his leverage. He tries to widen him a little bit. He takes the inside release. Now, this is the mistake where a lot of people will make, because this DB is completely fine with you taking the inside release. Because why? He's got help over there. So if you run the inside breaking route, okay, fine. You're going to be running right into his help. His job is to take away the 10-yard out, the corner, the comeback, the fade. So if I take this inside route and I have an inside, like if I take this inside release and I have an inside route, I have to do something called getting skinny. And that's where you use your body to almost lean into this DB. So at the break point, you could almost push off without getting called for it. Right? So let me rewind this. He goes here, instead of just taking this inside release thinking, oh, I got a free release, and just going to run off right into his safety help and having the corner right on his hip, he gets back up vertical. He gets skinny. So now when he decides to make this break point, because he's leaning into this DB, using his size to his advantage, that creates a bigger window for that quarterback to throw into. So fellas, we have to know how to get skinny. You take an inside release on an inside breaking route, we cannot just go run it. We have to get skinny. Same thing goes for the last example. Let's say it was like inside shade, for example, inside shade press, and you have to run an out route. You don't want to attack him and then run super far away from him and give him time to recover. You want to get skinny. Let's get into his cushion. And if he's hip to hip with you, you lean into him, use your size to your advantage. And by size, I don't even mean you have to be the biggest guy in the world. You have momentum and you're running into him. Let's play this thing again, full speed one more time. So second thing that's going to help you guys get more separation in one-on-one situations is getting skinny on your routes. So now let's talk about a little bit of zone coverage here. So sometimes you'll see DBs do this in one-on-ones. Obviously, we're going to be seeing this a lot in an actual live game scenario, which is more important. You know, we talk a lot about one-on-ones. And when I say one-on-ones, I mean one-on-one opportunities when you got full pads on. Like, yes, the one-on-ones are good teach tape because it kind of showcases you guys. It focuses in on the different coverages you'll see. But this is what we're trying to get ready for, real game scenario. So sometimes, as you guys all probably know, zone coverage turns kind of into man coverage, right? If this DB has no threats to his zone, he's not an idiot, he's not a robot, he's not like a Madden character where he's just going to sit in his zone, he might actually run with you. So we have to know how to get separation against these coverages. So Cooper's going to be running kind of this like deep crosser, and he's got outside shade zone coverage. So let's play this full speed. So what a lot of people don't understand about route running is that just because it's zone coverage, not man coverage, that they think the whole thing changes. It is still the same leverage responsibilities as anything. Playing wide receiver is about obviously technique, knowing what to do, knowing how to do things, but you also got to know when to do it and what the leverage responsibility is of the DB. What is he trying to accomplish? It's all about reading leverage. So he's outside leverage. We talked about this in the last clip. Whether it's press, whether he's off, outside leverage is trying to do what? Force the wide receiver to the inside. So let's force him inside to my help. Now, on this example, it looks like the help was gone. Like the help was either taken by another route or maybe it crashed on a run fake, whatever it is, but there didn't look like any help to the inside. So if I have to run, like let's say it's a post, for example, I want obviously a bigger window for my QB. Let's anticipate this is the DB and they got help to the inside. That's my throwing window. I want a bigger throwing window. So what I could do is threaten his leverage. When you have an inside breaking route against off zone coverage or off man coverage, outside leverage, you got to threaten his leverage. So that's what Cooper does. He attacks something we call the blind spot, right? So they call this the blind spot because that's exactly what it is. DB cannot see where we are at. It's like you're driving, you're trying to look over, you got to look over your shoulder to see that blind spot. Your mirror won't cover it. So that's why they call this the blind spot. We cannot see it as a DB. So when you go here, what does that look a lot like? When you threaten that blind spot, that looks a lot like you're going to be running an out. You're maybe running a vertical, a corner. You're trying to slip behind him, and he is susceptible there because that blind spot is exactly where he doesn't want you to go when he's outside shade. Remember, outside shade's trying to prevent the outside route. So if we can make it look like an outside route, I could threaten that leverage. Guess what that does? That can widen him and create a bigger opportunity or a bigger window for my QB. Like, let's assume that there's safety help over here. That just made the window maybe 2 to 3 yards bigger, which is a big, big difference for a QB who can throw the ball. So fellas, understand that route running is not about, and again, being able to win these one-on-one matchups. You have to understand leverage. You have to understand how to run your routes against a specific leverage. Like let's say he had to run an out route here. You wouldn't go to the blind spot. because he would just keep his leverage and widen. You would go at his inside shoulder. You would try to get him to open up his hips, then slip underneath. You got to know how to attack each leverage look. And we're going to get into more of that as this video progresses. So let's play this full speed. Great job by Cooper angling that stem to that blind spot, forcing that DB to flip, and then winning on that kind of deep over post concept. Okay, so now this is another example of Amari Cooper right here. And he's going to be running this like a lot of people said this looked like a sluggo, like a slant and go, where you break on the slant then up. But I honestly think Amari Cooper's not a bad route runner, so I think it's more of like a dig and a go because he breaks down at the break point. I don't think that's like Amari Cooper to do that on a double move when you're trying to sell a slant. So the main thing I want to talk about is when you are doing a double move, we obviously have to be conscious of getting separation, but we also need to be able to keep separation. And that comes from keeping your head down after the break. So you see it all the time in one-on-ones. Maybe we got like cover one in a real game scenario where they're only blitzing like maybe 5 guys. Maybe the running back's doing something. We have man-on-man protection, so I could hit something like a double move. And everybody loves to call double moves. They kill themselves by not focusing on keeping and maintaining their separation. It is not hard to get separation on a double move. You watch Amari Cooper here when he runs this dig and go, what does he do? He snaps his eyes to the inside, his hips and shoulders are committed, and he's running hard. If you could do all 3 of those things, a DB has to bite. He has to honor that because everything about that looks like the dig. Everything about like a slant and go looks like a slant. Out and up. Everything about the out looks like an out. You have to run the first route first. Now, everybody can do this, and I'm confident everybody can do this at a very, very young age, very, very beginner age of route running. But what they'll do is they'll get separation, and they get so anxious that they got this guy, and they'll turn around right away. They'll start to look back for the ball. But guess what? When you look back for the ball and your chest pops up, number one, you're slower, and you're giving the DB time to recover. But number 2, because you're slower, that QB is expecting you to accelerate. So he's putting it to a spot. And if you can't get to that spot, that's on us. So we have to keep my head down. Let's focus on widening the distance after a double move so I could win and get space. Same thing on a slant and go. You break to the slant, he pump fakes you, you keep your head down. Same thing on an out and up. He pump fakes you, you keep your head down and go. If it's like a corner post corner, different story. But anything where you got to sit down, then accelerate, or break, then accelerate, keep that head down to widen the distance from that DB. Let's play this thing again, full speed one more time. Great job by Cooper showcasing that on a double move, fellas, when you're in a one-on-one situation, you have to keep that head down to widen from the DB. Okay, so now we're paying attention to Mike Evans, and then we're paying attention to also Tom Brady on this. So everybody loves to talk about, doing the fancy releases. Like you got the slide release where you slide to the outside. You got more of a patient, like kind of skip release where you hesitate. This is a live game situation, man coverage, and this is exactly when you would want to use a longer developing release. So he's running like a slant route or a 5-yard in. The same thing applies on either one, but I want you to pay attention to the timing of this play. So if you can't see Brady on this and you don't see the O-line, pay attention to Mike Evans. The untrained eye would be like, oh, that takes way too long. Like if you ran this and you showed this and let's say it was practice and there was a camera right behind Mike Evans doing that, everybody would be in the comments saying that, oh, this takes too long. What is he doing? He's going to quarterback sacked. But I want you to watch Brady's feet right here. So watch how when he drops back, where he does a play action fake, number 1. So that's already a longer developing play. This is not every slant is a quick slant where the quarterback's just catching and throwing. There are times where maybe he's throwing a backside slant. Maybe he's throwing a backside 5-yard in. So you see how he does play action? Where do his eyes start? His eyes start left. And then where do his eyes get to? His eyes get to the right because that is the last part of his progression or one of the last parts of his progression. So Evans is a backside route. He is a second or third read on this play on top of play action. So because of that, because Evans is smart and he knows it, you guys have to, or he knows the play, I should say, you guys have to be patient with your releases. This is the time for those slower developing releases. If you guys are working these things in one-on-ones, that's cool. I'm cool with that. If you're going up against a DB and you work these longer routes, but do not do this kind of stuff when it is a quick game slant. If your quarterback says, hey, run a slant, like, okay, what play do you want me to run? Is it the quick slant where we're doing this terminology, or is it where you're taking a 3-step drop from gun and you're coming back to me late? Those are the questions that you need to be asking, and that shows that you're an intelligent wide receiver. So you see, again, if we're running this 5-yard in, you would want to not attack his leverage, because if you attack his leverage, what's he going to do? Keep his leverage, and you'll run right into him, just like we were talking about earlier. So you'd want to attack his outside shoulder try to get him to open up. So you see how Evans, he comes off here, he kind of takes a 3-step, and then he kind of takes a slower chatter, works a crossover, and then he's open, because that's the timing of Brady's progression. Imagine if Evans, and Evans probably could have gotten him with this, if you'd have just done 3 steps and broken it off right here and ran the slant or ran the in, he'd be to the window too early, and this DB would have too much time to recover. You have to base your releases off the timing of the play. That is why it's so important to watch like full plays. It's so important to know what the quarterback's doing, what drop he's doing. You can't be that receiver who just runs a route. You have to know the full play. You have to know the pass pro. You have to know the quarterback's drop. You don't need to know the entire play, I should say, but you got to know those things, because that's how we structure my routes. So this tip, to be a better route runner, never lose a one-on-one. Keep it realistic with your footwork. Make sure it times up with the play. Let's play this thing again, full speed one more time. We do not want to practice bad habits. I do not want to do this release when the quarterback's just catching and throwing, because I will never use that in a game. Use the stuff in one-on-ones in practice, what you would use in a real game. Okay, so now next thing I want to talk about is how you guys can get separation, or what you should know about getting separation on the goal line. Okay, so when you're facing goal line man coverage, it's one-on-one, maybe you guys are working that in the end zone, and again, it's live game situation. We have to know that DB is not going to backpedal. So we have to understand what range is. So let's play this full speed. So this is Garrett Wilson running a goal line fade. So he does a great job of keeping range with the DB and not getting thrown off. My favorite thing that you always hear DB, quote unquote, coaches say is that like, oh, anytime this wide receiver does this footwork stuff, oh, we're just going to jam him, just get hands on him. But it's like, we have a plan for that guy. Like we know what we're supposed to do. We're coming off the ball, and we know that if you get hands, I'm going to react a certain way. So they have to be patient. And when they're patient, and we know that they have to be patient, we could easily get a W on the win or on the route. So let's play this full speed. Sorry, let's break this down. Excuse me. So we have inside shade. He's about 2 to 3 off. Heels on like the goal line, if you will, not quite. But he is not going to back up. Anytime that you face man coverage on the goal line, DB will not backpedal. DB will not weave to the inside. He will sit right there. But his leverage responsibility still stays the same. He's inside shade just because he's not weaving or backpedaling. He still has to protect what? The slant. So if I have to run an outside route like a fade, maybe I convert fade, drop it off into a comeback, an out route, anything outside breaking, I'd want to attack that leverage, threaten him where he doesn't want me to go, because that might get him to move laterally, which creates more space for me back to the outside. So Wilson, he attacks him. He does kind of this like foot fire release, attacks his leverage inside, and you see stepping outside the frame, hip and shoulders are going to the inside. That's what gets the DB to move. But like I said, he does a great job of keeping range. Where a lot of people screw up on this is they think that this DB is going to start backpedaling or start inching back on the goal line. That's an easy slant route. So what guys will do is they'll attack, but they get too close. They get way too close, and the DB will get hands. Wilson does a great job of keeping about a yard of space, maybe a half a yard, but he's still attacking him. He's still stepping outside of his frame, but he keeps a good range to where if this DB does try to get hands, he'll be reaching. He has to stay disciplined. He's not going to be able to backpedal and stay patient. He's got to meet you right on that goal line. And that's why we should always win on the goal line. That DB's not backpedaling. We can close the space, but maintain some good range. Now, could you do this on a slant? I think this is the only time where you could maybe attack a DB's leverage and run a slant in front of him is on the goal line, because he's not going to weave to the inside. Normally, you attack a DB's leverage, he weaves inside, then you try to run in front of him, and he's right there. But if you can square him up and attack his midline, because that DB's going to sit there on goal line, you could do the exact same thing. You could keep range, and you could give a fake outside now, maybe try to get him to jump, try to get him to cover all this grass he has to cover, and then he could win on a slant. So the only time I would teach that is on the goal line. So that's textbook right there. So next tip, again, to be able to win every one-on-one matchup, understand a DB's responsibility on the goal line and know how to attack that leverage. Let's play this again, full speed. Great job by Wilson throwing, stepping outside his frame, and then being able to win on that fade route. All right, so this next clip here kind of builds off of what we've been talking about the whole time, but this is how would you guys run like a deeper post route versus inside shade press. And again, this comes down to taking what the DB gives you. Okay, so he's inside shade. We know, not on the goal line, nothing. He's playing true inside shade coverage, trying to take away the inside. And you see this is Thayer Thomas. He's running a post. So let's play at full speed. So he comes off, attacks him, takes what the DB gives him, and is able to restack. So one thing you got to know about route running is your separation happens at the top of the break. Your press release, what goes on right here, is for two things, spacing and timing. Because he's inside shade. There, Thomas very easily could have like tried to square up and then go to the inside and run this post. But think about this. There are other routes on the field, especially when you're man coverage. So like, let's say you take the inside release, you force it, but the DB gets hands, you don't give maybe a good enough move, or even if you do give a good move, his responsibility is to not let you go there. So if you force it and he gets hands and he reroutes you and then you run this post, but the slot receiver on the other side of the field is running like a dig or something like that, or maybe like a hook, and you end up running into him, or you end up running in and you getting in his way, that's bad spacing. You have to take what the DB gives you in terms of an outside release to keep spacing on the play. Like, let's say you're an outside receiver and you have to run, like, let's say you're running a post and the slot is also running a post, but you force the inside release and your post is like 3 yards from the slot. That's very bad. You got to take what he gives you so you maintain the spacing on the play. Your separation comes at the top of the route. So Thayer Thomas does a great job of attacking him, getting into his frame, and then taking the outside release. So now when I go here, I got one of two options. I could either stack and give a move, and in a perfect world, that's what we want to do every time. But I do realize that sometimes DBs play it well. DBs are coached, DBs are well coached, and they're disciplined athletes usually. So when they're right on my hip, what could I do? I could take my right hand and swat him by at his hip, swat him by at his shoulder, and maybe slip underneath. But that plan you have to have at the top of the route. And it's got to be a reaction. It happens fast. It's all based on the way the DB plays you. You just got to know, I'm taking what the DB gives me in terms of my release so I can keep spacing and so I don't get completely jammed and rerouted, because the whole point of a DB jamming is to screw up timing with the QB. So I can't lose my timing and I can't lose my spacing. Let's play this thing again, full speed one more time. Thomas actually does a really good job of restacking, giving like a rocker step at the top, and then obviously making that great catch. Okay, so now, last thing I want to cover is how press releases, like we talked about in the very first clip, a lot of playing the wide receiver position about reacting, but also your press release can be like a form of a reactionary thing. So we're watching this wide receiver do something we call a split release. So a split release is exactly how it sounds. You bring your back foot up even with your front foot, and your front foot steps out. So for like a split second, you freeze the DB, get a read on him, and then you're able to get up into your route. Now, personally, this route, like we talked about, it's a longer route, takes a while. But again, we don't know the situation they're working. Maybe this is a play action concept. Maybe this is the backside read, or maybe this is a third read. You never know, right? I guarantee it's probably not a backside read because it's outside breaking. But again, it's probably play action, probably a longer developing route. So it's not fair to say that, this isn't realistic. But let's focus on the release. Let's not focus on the top of the route. So this split release, like I said, you bring your front foot out and your back foot up even with your front foot. You get to a base. Now, when you are facing like head up coverage, where the DB is like directly in front of you, I love this split release because it's a way to tell what leverage he's going to take. Like in the last example, we were showing Thayer Thomas, and he had that inside shade look. We attacked him, take the outside release. But when this DB's head up, we don't essentially know what leverage he's going to keep, right? We don't know if he's going to be outside shade. We don't know if he's going to be inside shade. So what I do is, or what this receiver does, is he hits this split release to kind of get a read on him, see how he's going to react. So the DB starts to shade to the outside. Okay, fine. Because I'm in the split release, which is, remember, you bring your back foot up even with your front foot, and your front foot goes out wide. So now you're in a balanced base. He could essentially push off of the right foot and go outside. He could essentially push off the left foot and go inside. Because we got to that base, though, with the release, I could do that. I could react either way. DB shades to the outside, okay, fine. I take the inside release. It's all about reacting. Sometimes press releases are more so about reacting than anything else, and that's the last thing I'll leave you with. Let's play this thing again, full speed one more time. Great job by this wide receiver hitting that split release, getting a read on the DB in almost a split second, and being able to react off of his doing. All right, fellas, I really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. We always appreciate the feedback. It's always great to hear from you guys. And again, fellas, like I said, we are traveling out to 15 more states for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camps. So if you guys are local to San Francisco, Orlando, New Orleans, Charlotte, Dallas, the DMV, St. Louis, Honolulu, Boston, Cleveland, Austin, Seattle, Newark, Denver, or Los Angeles, we'd love to have you out to one of our camps, you guys. All the information is in that very first link below. It's 2 whole days, 8 hours of work. We'll have DBs out there for one-on-ones. You get a ton of value out of it. So check out that very first link below, fellas. I'll see you next time.